The human fleet arrived at the edge of the Orion Nebula, a vast, star-filled region of space that few had dared to explore. Their mission was simple yet critical: investigate a mysterious signal that had been detected coming from an uncharted system deep within the nebula. The signal, encoded with a strange pattern that no known species could decipher, had sparked curiosity and excitement among the crew. But as they approached the source of the signal, they found themselves faced with something far more unexpected: an alien race unlike any they had ever encountered. The Caliths, a species with advanced technology far beyond anything humanity had developed, were the first to make contact. Their sleek, otherworldly ships glided into the human fleet's path, their hulls shimmering with energy shields that seemed to bend light itself. But it wasn't just their ships that set them apart, it was their attitude. The Caliths looked upon humanity with disdain. From their perspective, humans were a young, primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel. The Caliths had witnessed countless civilizations rise and fall, and they saw the humans as nothing more than another fleeting race with no real significance. It was clear in the way they spoke to the humans, their words dripping with condescension. "Look at your ships," one Calith diplomat sneered over the comms. "Primitive. Your armor is bulky and outdated. You believe you can challenge us?" The humans, gathered aboard the flagship, exchanged uneasy glances. Lieutenant Commander Ava Carter, the fleet's commanding officer, stood at the forefront of the conversation, trying to maintain composure despite the obvious insult. She was no stranger to diplomacy, but this was different. The Caliths' arrogance was palpable, their eyes locked on the human fleet as though they were studying an insect under a microscope. As the tension rose, the Caliths issued a challenge. "We propose a mock battle," said the Calith leader, his voice cold and unyielding. "Let us see how your armor fares against our weapons. If you survive, we might consider your species worthy of discussion. If not, well, there will be nothing left to discuss." There was a moment of silence aboard the human fleet, and Ava could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. To back down would be a humiliation, and to accept without confidence would set a dangerous precedent. Ava knew that her crew's pride was on the line. She was aware of the gaps in their technology compared to the Caliths, but she refused to show weakness. "We accept," she said firmly, her voice steady. The words felt like a challenge in themselves. The Caliths seemed pleased with the response. "Very well," the alien leader replied, his tone dripping with amusement. "Prepare yourselves. You will soon learn the cost of underestimating us." As the human fleet prepared for the mock battle, nerves ran high. The crew, particularly Ava, had always prided themselves on their discipline and readiness, but this was different. The Caliths were known for their power, and the human fleet's defenses, while advanced for their time, were far from the cutting-edge technology of the alien species. Their armor was a bulky amalgamation of old-world materials and cutting-edge nanotech designed more for durability than for agility or speed. It was powerful, yes, but it looked outdated when compared to the sleek, advanced armor of the Caliths. As the battle commenced, the Caliths unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, bright and intense, designed to disable the human armor with a single hit. Ava's team, clad in their bulky, heavy armor, formed a defensive perimeter. Their armor hummed to life, a mix of advanced nanotechnology and kinetic energy dampeners, ready to absorb the incoming blasts. The Caliths fired relentlessly, their weapons cutting through space like sharp needles, their confidence evident. Ava's team moved with practiced precision, ducking behind the protective barriers of their ships, using their advanced sensors to track the enemy's movements. But the Caliths showed no mercy. They launched wave after wave of energy blasts, pushing the humans back. For a moment, it seemed as though the Caliths would overwhelm them, proving their superiority once again. Ava's mind raced. The situation was deteriorating fast. Her armor was holding up, but the constant barrage was taking its toll, and her team's shields were beginning to flicker under the pressure. She refused to show fear, but in the back of her mind, she wondered how much longer they could endure. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the Calith warriors, growing overconfident in his belief that the humans were no match for their weapons, took a step forward, aiming a high-powered plasma cannon directly at Ava's position. Without hesitation, he fired. The shot raced through the void of space, a brilliant ball of energy aimed at her with unrelenting force. It seemed certain that the human armor would not stand a chance. But as the plasma shot struck Ava's position, something incredible occurred. The blast hit her armor and didn't penetrate. Instead, it spread across the surface, dissipating harmlessly as the energy was absorbed and neutralized by the nanotech in her suit. The Caliths stared in disbelief. Ava's team remained unharmed. The human armor, thought to be obsolete by the Caliths, had withstood the full force of one of their most advanced weapons. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The Caliths had expected a swift and easy victory. They had assumed their technology was so far beyond the humans that no defense could possibly stand against it. But in that instant, they realized their mistake. The humans weren't just surviving, they were adapting. Ava's voice broke the silence, calm and unwavering. "It seems you've underestimated us," she said, her words carrying the weight of her resolve. The Caliths exchanged uncertain glances, their arrogance beginning to falter. Ava could sense their hesitation. They had seen their weapons fail, and now they had to confront an uncomfortable truth. The humans were far more resourceful than they had given credit for. What had started as a simple challenge was now turning into something far more significant. The Caliths were faced with a choice: continue to dismiss humanity as an inferior species or reconsider everything they thought they knew about the humans. Little did they know, the battle had only just begun. The mock battle was in full swing, and the human fleet found themselves facing an overwhelming display of Calith superiority. The aliens unleashed their advanced plasma weaponry with ruthless precision, sending bolts of searing energy toward Ava and her team. Each blast was a vivid streak of light that cut through the darkness of space, powerful enough to obliterate anything in its path. The Caliths had energy shields that shimmered like a mirage, and their sleek, well-crafted armor seemed almost alive, constantly shifting to adapt to the energy they wielded. It was a display of technological perfection that made the humans' gear appear clunky and outdated by comparison. Ava, clad in her heavy human-made armor, could feel the weight of the situation as the first wave of firepower pounded her unit's defenses. The human armor, designed with a mix of old-world metallurgy and cutting-edge nanomaterials, groaned under the strain. It wasn't meant to handle weapons like this. The Caliths' energy weapons pierced through the air with a high-pitched hum, and it only took seconds before one of Ava's soldiers, Lieutenant Harris, was knocked off his feet by a blast that sent him sprawling to the ground, smoke rising from the cracked surface of his armor. He wasn't the only one. The entire team was struggling to keep up. Ava herself could barely hold her ground as her armor's energy reserves began to deplete rapidly. Every time they tried to move, another barrage of plasma would strike, forcing them back. The Caliths laughed from their ships, their mocking voices echoing over the comms. They could see it. The humans were outmatched. It was only a matter of time before they'd be forced to surrender. To them, the battle was a formality, a simple demonstration of their superiority. The humans' defense, though, was no match for the Caliths' tech. What they didn't know was that Ava and her team weren't just relying on their armor. They had learned to survive with what they had, to fight through adversity with ingenuity. But even Ava had to admit that the situation was dire. The Caliths' weapons were overwhelming, and their shields made it impossible to strike back effectively. It felt like an insurmountable wall, a crushing weight of power that the humans couldn't escape. But Ava refused to give up. "Fall back into formation," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. Despite the barrage, the team obeyed, pulling back into a defensive circle behind the larger ship hulls that provided cover. They took a brief moment to regroup. The Caliths, sensing victory, increased their fire, more focused now. Ava could feel the sweat on her brow as she adjusted her position. This was the moment that would define their survival. The team steadied their breathing, syncing their movements. The Caliths were relentless. They knew the human strength would break soon. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something strange happened. One of the Calith warriors, a high-ranking officer with an air of arrogance, stood tall on the command ship's platform. He smiled down at the humans below, certain that they were close to surrender. He raised his plasma cannon, the weapon crackling with deadly energy, and locked onto Ava's unit. In his arrogance, he fired directly at them, a concentrated shot that seemed destined to wipe them out in one burst. It was a power unlike anything they had yet faced, unforgiving, swift. The shot flew through space, its blue plasma glow lighting up the battlefield. Ava's heart raced. The blast was coming straight for them. But, unexpectedly, when the plasma struck Ava's shield, something incredible happened. The shot didn't explode. It didn't vaporize them. Instead, the human armor absorbed the energy, the surface rippling like water disturbed by a stone. The blast surged harmlessly across their bodies, leaving no trace of damage. Ava's heart skipped a beat. Her team's shields had held. The plasma had been completely neutralized. The Keyleths froze. Silence descended over the battlefield as they watched in stunned disbelief. For a long moment, nothing moved. The humans, who they had dismissed as weak and primitive, had withstood the very weapon they had thought would be their undoing. Ava slowly stood, her armor gleaming under the harsh light of distant stars. She didn't speak immediately, but her posture said it all. She and her team had not only survived, they had just defied the Keyleths in the most direct way possible. The Keyleths' mocking laughter, which had been so confident and unrelenting, quickly faded into uncertainty. What had they just witnessed? The human armor, built from materials and technology they had thought were obsolete, had absorbed a weapon that had been designed to tear through their own defenses. The Keyleth warrior who had fired the shot now stood still, his confidence faltering. For the first time, he seemed unsure. His once pristine armor, designed for destruction, had failed against something so unexpected. Ava saw the shift in their expressions, the flicker of doubt in their eyes. The Keyleths had underestimated the humans, and now the tide had turned. What they thought was a formality had become a serious confrontation. The battle was no longer a mere test of strength. It had become a challenge to their very beliefs. Ava's team stood tall, their resolve renewed. They were bruised and battered, but they were not defeated. The Keyleths, on the other hand, were forced to reconsider their position. They had assumed their weapons would break the humans in moments, but now they faced the undeniable truth that humanity had something they hadn't expected: resilience. Ava's voice broke through the silence, calm and unwavering. "Is that the best you've got?" she said, her words carrying a weight that was felt on both sides of the battlefield. The Keyleths didn't answer immediately. Instead, they began to whisper among themselves, their arrogance giving way to uncertainty. Ava and her team exchanged glances, their confidence growing with every passing second. What had started as a mock battle was no longer about proving they were worthy. It was about survival, and it seemed the humans had just proved their worth in the most unexpected way. The Keyleths, initially so certain of their superiority, were now left in a state of disbelief. Their advanced weapons, designed to dismantle any civilization with ease, had been rendered ineffective by the humans' seemingly outdated armor. What had once seemed like an overwhelming victory was now turning into a source of confusion. They had never encountered a species capable of withstanding their weaponry, and the longer they observed the humans, the more they found themselves questioning their initial assumptions. Ava and her team, who had been written off as little more than an amusing diversion, now stood like silent sentinels in the center of the battlefield. Their armor, bulky and heavy by Keyleth standards, was absorbing energy blasts that should have torn it apart. The Keyleths, their advanced technology failing them, turned their attention to the human armor, trying to understand how it was possible for something so primitive to endure their most powerful attacks. The leader of the Keyleth forces, once brimming with arrogance, now found himself baffled. He summoned his advisors to confer in private, their voices low but filled with urgency. It was clear that the Keyleths needed to understand this anomaly, or else they might find themselves in a situation they hadn't expected, a race of humans standing their ground. The human armor, they realized, wasn't just tough, it was extraordinary. Ava, sensing the shift in the Keyleths' demeanor, felt an uneasy calm settle over her. This was no longer just a mock battle. The Keyleths weren't treating them like children anymore. They were studying them. They wanted to understand how the humans had managed to survive the barrage. It was a question that Ava had anticipated, and she was ready to answer it. Over the comms, she addressed the Caliths, her voice steady but carrying an undeniable edge of pride. "You want to know how our armor works?" she said, her words clear and unwavering. "It's simple, really. We've had to fight for everything we have. Every piece of technology, every bit of knowledge has come at a cost. Our armor is no different. It combines nanotechnology, kinetic dampeners, and alloys mined from ancient Earth. It was made to survive against the odds." Ava paused, letting the words sink in. "Humanity didn't build this armor to fight you. We built it because we had to. We fought wars for survival, faced threats we couldn't even understand, and we've always found a way to survive. This armor is the result of centuries of trial and error. It wasn't made for show, it was made to endure." The Caliths, once so sure of their invincibility, were now listening intently. The idea that such a primitive species had created technology capable of withstanding their most advanced weaponry was almost inconceivable to them. Their race had risen to power through sheer technological superiority, and the very notion that a young species like humanity could resist them challenged everything they had ever believed. The Caliph leadership, after a long discussion, issued a new order, a second round of tests. They needed to know if this human armor was truly capable of withstanding multiple assaults, or if it had simply been a fluke. With the situation now escalating, Ava knew there was no turning back. She and her team had already proven their resilience, but the Caliths weren't going to back down easily. They would push harder, test their limits, and see just how far humanity could go before breaking. Ava gave the order to her team to prepare for the next round. The tension was thick, each soldier aware that the upcoming barrage could be even more devastating than the last. They readied themselves, reinforcing their defenses and ensuring that every possible advantage was accounted for. Ava's mind raced, but her face remained stoic. She had no intention of showing fear, not now. They had survived the first wave. They could survive the next. As the Caliths readied their weapons, Ava and her team moved into position. The aliens weren't taking any chances now. They launched a barrage of plasma bolts, faster and more concentrated than before, their energy glowing brightly as they streaked toward the humans. Each shot seemed to scream through the vacuum of space, a reminder of just how powerful the Caliths truly were. The human team braced themselves. Ava felt the surge of power as the first blast hit her armor, the energy vibrating through her body, but it held strong. She could hear the hum of the nanotech working, the kinetic dampeners absorbing the force, and the protective alloys absorbing the brunt of the blast. She and her team stood their ground, refusing to retreat. It was the same feeling she had felt before, a terrifying, exhilarating certainty that no matter how powerful their enemy was, humanity's will to survive would outlast it. The Caliths were watching with bated breath. They fired again and again, each shot a test of the humans' endurance. The plasma bolts struck, but with each strike, the results were the same. The human armor absorbed the energy, withstanding the blows as though they were nothing more than an inconvenience. Ava's team didn't move, their shields glowing brightly as they absorbed the incoming plasma fire. Their confidence began to build with each successive blast, but so did the Caliths' realization that they had underestimated humanity in a way they had never done before. The Caliths were no longer laughing. They were silent, watching the humans with a growing sense of awe and fear. Ava could sense the shift in their behavior. They had come here to prove their dominance, to crush the humans beneath their superior technology. But instead, they were witnessing something they had never encountered, a species that fought not just to win, but to survive. The humans weren't just resilient, they were relentless. Ava's voice broke the silence, her words carrying across the battlefield. "Is this what you expected?" she called out. "You thought we were weak. You thought we would break under pressure. But we didn't." The Caliths didn't respond. Instead, they launched a final barrage, their weapons at full power, determined to break the humans once and for all. The question now loomed large in Ava's mind. Was this just another test? Or had the humans truly stumbled upon something that could turn the tide of this war? Could they truly survive against the Caliths? Or would the next blast be the one that shattered their defenses? Ava and her team stood firm, waiting for the answer to reveal itself. The battle had only just begun, and the outcome was uncertain. But one thing was clear: the Keyleths had underestimated humanity, and that mistake was about to cost them dearly. The battle raged on, the tension in the air palpable as the Keyleths intensified their attacks, no longer treating the humans as a mere nuisance, but as a real threat. Their initial overconfidence had shattered like glass, replaced with a cold, calculating fury. The elite warriors, once sure of their absolute superiority, began to struggle. Their plasma weapons, thought to be the ultimate tool of destruction, were no longer breaking through the human armor. Every shot they fired only seemed to reinforce a truth they couldn't escape. The humans had found a way to survive, and not just survive, but fight back. Ava, watching the Keyleths grow desperate, could see the shift in their approach. They began to focus on analyzing every inch of the human armor, searching for a weakness they could exploit. But with each failed attempt, Ava and her team began to see an opening. It wasn't just their armor that had caught the Keyleths off guard, it was the human spirit. The Keyleths, used to crushing civilizations with ease, had never been faced with a people so determined to prove their worth. To the Keyleths, the galaxy was their domain, and any species they encountered was simply another stepping stone in their path. But here, in the heart of this battle, the Keyleths were beginning to realize that humanity had no intention of being that stepping stone. Ava's voice rang out, calm but filled with a fierce clarity. "We're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting to prove we belong here on this stage, in this galaxy." Her words weren't just for her team, they were a declaration to the Keyleths. It was no longer about technology or superiority. It was about a race's resolve, their will to stand firm, and the understanding that humanity had earned its place among the stars. The Keyleths' frustration grew with each passing minute. The humans, whom they had once seen as weak and primitive, had found a way to push back. Ava knew it wasn't just the armor that had made the difference. It was the way they adapted, the way they fought. Humans had always been survivors, and they had learned how to use their ingenuity and persistence as weapons just as powerful as any plasma cannon. The Keyleths, meanwhile, relied on their overwhelming technological might, which was failing them now. They had become so dependent on their energy weapons that they didn't know how to respond when those weapons weren't enough. It was a weakness Ava had spotted early, and now it was time to exploit it. "They think they can break us," she murmured to herself, her mind racing. "But they haven't seen what we can do when we're pushed." Ava's team began to implement guerrilla tactics, using the terrain of the battlefield to their advantage. The Keyleths, overconfident in their strength, didn't anticipate the humans' ability to adapt and fight strategically. They disrupted Keyleth communications, scrambled their sensors, and hit their supply lines with precision strikes. The battle had evolved. It was no longer a one-sided mockery. It had turned into a real fight. The Keyleths, struggling to keep up with the guerrilla attacks, began to fracture. Their commanders, who had once been the unchallenged leaders of their people, started to bicker among themselves. They couldn't understand what was happening. They had underestimated humanity in ways they couldn't fix, and now they were paying the price. Ava could see the growing unease in the Keyleth forces. The elite warriors, once poised and confident, were now on the defensive. They had never had to fight like this before. It was a battle of ideals, of cultures. The Keyleths fought to maintain their place at the top of the galaxy, to assert their dominance, while humanity fought to prove something far more profound, that they belonged. That they were more than just survivors, they were fighters, and they could stand toe-to-toe with anyone in the galaxy. The humans' resilience was becoming their greatest weapon. The Keyleths, who had never been challenged in such a way, found themselves slowly losing control of the battlefield. Ava's team continued to strike with precision, using the cover of their armor's durability to move through the battlefield unnoticed. The Keyleths tried to retaliate, but the humans were everywhere, unpredictable and relentless. Each time the Keyleths adjusted their strategy, the humans adapted, finding new ways to outmaneuver them. Ava herself was a master of tactics, always staying one step ahead. She could see the cracks forming in the Keyleths' ranks. They were beginning to question their own tactics, their own beliefs. For centuries, they had dominated through force, and now they were being beaten by a race they had dismissed as weak. It was a bitter pill for them to swallow. As the battle stretched on, the Keyleth leadership began to see the writing on the wall. Their plans, their strategy, and their superiority were no match for humanity's unyielding determination. The clash of ideals had become a literal battle, and in this moment, it seemed that humanity might just prove that their place in the galaxy was earned, not given. Ava, her team by her side, could feel the energy of the fight change. The Keyleths had underestimated them in the beginning, thinking their victory was assured. But now, they were beginning to understand what the humans were capable of. The Keyleths might have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but they didn't have what humanity had, a fire that burned through adversity and the unwavering will to never back down. The battle had become something more than a fight for survival. It had become a battle for respect. The Keyleths had tested humanity, and now humanity was proving them wrong. But the fight was far from over. The question remained, could the Keyleths adapt in time, or had humanity already won a victory that would echo through the galaxy forever? Ava didn't know yet, but one thing was certain: this battle was far from finished. The human resolve had just begun to show its true power. The final stage of the battle was set on the Keyleth flagship, a massive vessel that loomed like a dark titan in the void of space. Ava and her team had infiltrated the ship, moving with stealth and precision through its corridors. The Keyleth leadership, once so confident and unshakable, was now holed up in their command center, scrambling to regain control after the crushing blows humanity had dealt them. The Keyleths had underestimated human resilience, and now they were paying the price. Ava felt the weight of the moment. They had come so far, survived impossible odds, and now they were on the verge of achieving something no one had believed possible. The entire Keyleth fleet, their invincible warriors, had been reduced to mere shadows of their former selves, their once great strength crumbling under the relentless pressure of humanity's will to fight. And at the center of this struggle was Ava, standing ready to face the very figure who had been the symbol of Keyleth superiority, the warlord. He was a towering figure, his arrogance written across every feature. He had led his people with the belief that no race, no matter how advanced, could ever challenge the Keyleth's dominance. To him, the human resistance had been nothing more than a temporary nuisance. But as Ava stood in front of him, she could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The once unshakable Keyleth leader was now aware of one undeniable truth: humans had proven them wrong. The warlord sneered as he raised his arm, preparing to unleash one final, devastating plasma strike. "You think your primitive armor will save you this time, human?" he taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. "I'll make sure there's nothing left of you to remember." Ava's hand tightened around her weapon, but she remained calm. Her team had already dealt the Keyleths a blow that would be felt across the galaxy, but this final confrontation was personal. The warlord's arrogance, his belief in the infallibility of Keyleth technology, was the last thing standing between victory and complete defeat for his race. He fired, a brilliant plasma beam erupting from his gauntlet. It streaked toward Ava with terrifying speed, but this time she didn't move. She didn't flinch. The energy surged toward her, and as it struck her armor, something incredible happened. Instead of the blast dissipating or being absorbed as it had before, it was reflected back with a force so powerful that it seemed to bend space itself. The Keyleth warlord's eyes widened in shock as the blast, now redirected by the human armor, hurtled back toward him. The air was filled with the sound of the blast's crackling energy, and the warlord barely had time to react before the blast slammed into the command center with a deafening explosion. In an instant, his arrogance was obliterated, his command center reduced to rubble. The Keyleth warlord, the symbol of their supremacy, was no more. Silence followed, thick and heavy, as the remaining Keyleth warriors and commanders were left in stunned disbelief. The fleet, once so proud and mighty, had no leader. The Keyleths had never faced a situation like this before. They had believed their technology was infallible, but humanity had proven them wrong. It wasn't technology alone that had won this battle. It was the human spirit, unyielding and determined, that had made all the difference. The Keyleth fleet, now leaderless and broken, hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, Ava made her move. She sent out a clear transmission to the Keyleth fleet, her voice cutting through the silence of space. "Your warlord is gone," she said, her tone firm and resolute. "Your fleet is broken. The choice is yours: surrender or face total destruction. But know this, humanity has proven that it will not be crushed, and we will never bow to tyranny." The Keyleths, their pride shattered and their leadership decimated, had no choice but to surrender. They had fought for their place in the galaxy, but humanity had shown them that might alone was not enough. It was resolve, courage, and the refusal to yield that had carried the day. As the Keyleth fleet lowered their weapons, signaling their surrender, Ava felt a wave of relief wash over her. The battle was over. Humanity had won. The Keyleths, once the dominant force in the galaxy, had been humbled by a species they had dismissed as inferior. But the humans' victory wasn't just about defeating the Keyleths, it was about proving something far more important. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity, with all its flaws and imperfections, had earned its place among the stars. Ava and her team made their way back to Earth, their mission accomplished, their victory complete. The journey had been long and perilous, but they had triumphed against all odds. The story of their victory would spread across the galaxy, inspiring other races to believe that they, too, could stand tall in the face of overwhelming adversity. As they returned home, the people of Earth greeted them as heroes. Their victory had not only secured humanity's place in the galaxy, but it had also proven that the human spirit, when tested, could rise above even the most advanced and powerful forces. The Keyleths had learned this lesson the hard way. And now, the entire galaxy knew that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, no longer a young, inexperienced race, but a powerful and unyielding presence that would shape the future of the stars.